Hello everyone, this is Tom Fox and I'd like to welcome you to episode 7 of This Week in FCPA. It's for the week ending June 3rd. In this episode, Jay Rosen and I are back together again. We talk about several different topics. We talk about my travels this week and Jay's travels next week to ACFE. We also take a look at the continued fallout from the Panama Papers-Mossack Fonseca matter, where the law firm has closed its offices in Jersey, the Isle of Man, and Gibraltar, and is cutting back in Nevada and Wyoming. We talk about the FIFA bonus scandal, which erupted today. We talk about disgorgement and the Securities and Exchange Commission in the context of the FCPA. Jay talks about the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals ruling, which said you can't, doesn't extend past the statute of limitations. I talk about the IRS ruling, which said this FCPA disgorgement payments are not deductible on your tax or corporate tax returns. I talk a little bit about the bonus to the former CEO of Valeant Pharmaceutical. We talk about Brazil's ongoing struggles around bribery, corruption, and the sacking of Brazil's transparency minister, and the disbanding of the CGU and the fallout from that. It comes in at, and I also talk about the great article in the New Yorker magazine called The Bank Robber, and we bat around the question of should data thieves be compensated when the data that they steal leads to criminal convictions. This is Tom Fox. I thank you very much for listening. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox. Apologize for the echo. Hopefully it's not on the tape, but it's in my head. And welcome to This Week in FCPA. I'm back with my good friend and colleague, Jay Rosen, where it's hopefully doesn't rain or never rains in Southern California, because we've had 6 to 8 inches over the past few weeks here. Welcome, Jay.
Thank you, Tom, and kudos to you for getting back on an early flight this morning and still making this week's blab. Apologize for the phone ringing in the background. That should be over in a minute. So why don't I let you fill for a sec?
Okay. So we had a lot of information, events, and other things happen this week, even though we didn't have a FCPA enforcement action announced. The first thing I want to talk about really came out just within the last few hours, and it involves our good friends at FIFA. Probably the most transparent and ethical organization I can think of, where it turned out that the top 3 officers had awarded themselves over $85 million in bonuses over the past 3 years. And they just did it between themselves. So, I'm sure that, I don't know if the new Merrill Brink will be like the old Merrill Brink, but I'm sure that that was something that, you guys could do as well. But it's just unbelievable. It gets better and better. And the story broke this morning, so we don't really know what the parameters might be, and indeed if there was any criminal activity. But it's been explained to me that there was basically no corporate governance at FIFA, and whatever Sepp Blatter wanted to do, that's what people did. And there was no oversight. There's no Swiss government oversight. It's just huge amounts of money. So how this is going to play out going forward, we don't know, but certainly very interesting. The second thing is, here's a question I have for you. If someone steals data and it turns out that that data shows criminal conduct, should that person who stole the data be compensated? And that was a large part of an article in the New Yorker magazine this week called The Bank Robber, written by Patrick Madden Keefe, about Hervé Falciani, who stole records of clients of HSBC in Switzerland. And it turned out, of course, that this was a huge tax evasion scam. And the Swiss response was to try to prosecute him for data theft. And he was able to get to France.
That shows a certain sense of neutrality, huh?
Well, it certainly puts things in a perspective because, tone is important. And we have to have rules.
The train's got to run on time.
Exactly. I commend this article to you because this Falciani character is quite the character. But the question was posed, should he be compensated? If you think to Bradley Birkenfield, the UBS bank whistleblower actually received a whistleblower award from the IRS while he was in prison for his own nefarious tax problems. But here we had German Chancellor Angela Merkel announced that the German government would happily pay for the information if there were German citizens who had engaged in tax evasion. So that caused quite a stir. And what happens now, if you'll think of the Panama Papers, at least to this point, no one's asked for any money for that data release, but what if people start stealing data and get compensated for it? What kind of incentive system does that set up? So I found it very interesting, lots to think about. I don't know how Edward Snowden may or may not fit into that kind of discussion, but certainly he should be a part of it. But here we had someone who stole data, which clearly showed criminal conduct, of individuals in a wide number of countries, investigations going forward and prosecutions. And the question is not whether that person should go to jail, or it's not the primary question, but certainly a question is, should they be compensated? Should they be awarded? Should they receive a whistleblower award? I don't know the answers to any.
Yeah, I think it's a slippery slope. It reminds me of the Sony hack a year and a half ago, whereas, again, you had somebody coming in with malintent to do something to the corporation. And unfortunately, it led to the downfall of a couple executives because it released confidential information that they didn't want the community to have. So it damaged their reputations, and it led to economic losses at the studio. So again, I think the initial intent is malicious, to come in and steal, and it's almost ironic that these people have an opportunity to potentially collect under whistleblower awards.
So what do you have for?
Well, I wanted to add on to some more good stuff from the Panama Papers and a little news item that Mossack Fonseca, the firm that's really at the center of this for setting up all these tax havens, has decided to close its offices in Jersey, Isle of Man, Gibraltar, and they're cutting back in Nevada and Wyoming. And they had a very terse Twitter statement saying that they regret that they're closing these, different offices, but that they still feel that they have done nothing wrong. All they do is help their clients set up legitimate legal entities. So, again, they're giving out the company line.
Is it just government overreach, or am I missing something here?
I don't know. It's so that's one of them. The second thing I got, which is kind of interesting, is we'll do a little film buff thing. Terry Gilliam had a very iconoclastic movie in 1985 called Brazil.
Sure.
And it was about a bureaucrat in a retro future who tried to correct an administrative error, and everything went haywire. So it was a very interesting cast: Jonathan Pryce, Robert De Niro, Katherine Hellman from Soap fame, Ian Holm, Michael Palin from Monty Python, and Bob Hoskins. So in this world that's gone a little bit wild, it seems like fiction has created reality. And in Brazil now, there's an issue that the new transparency minister has just been forced to resign because he's caught on tape explaining to a member of parliament how to avoid being prosecuted for ethics violations. And the question is the new temporary leader of the company, what the heck is going on there? The CGU has been disbanded, and this guy's a placeholder until they decide whether to go forward with impeachment hearings on Dilma. But it just seems to be more absurd daily information coming out of the country.
So let me ask you a technical question. Why do we call Dilma when her name is Dilma Rousseff? You and I would not call someone else by their first name. So why do we all do that?
I think that we just have this false familiarity with the situation. But you're right. But I guess we could say we say President Obama, right? We don't say Barack. So we'll have to say Russo going forward.
I don't know what you call Hillary, because one of you Hollywood types, I'm sure you're so but
hey, come on, Tom. Remember, you have similar sympathies growing up in the South, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. You don't trust the GOP carpetbaggers, do you?
Never.
But we're not going to get political. We're talking about ethics, compliance, and corruption.
That we are. The situation in Brazil, Andy Spalding, who writes on the FCPA blog, has written several pieces, and I would commend you, if you're listening to this, to go to the FCPA blog, because he raises some very interesting and or troubling questions about where the new interim president may be taking all this. When you have your head of anti-corruption on tape telling people how to avoid even an investigation, that's certainly not good. But when they tried to, or I guess he did, disband the CGU or roll it into another agency, employees actually marched on the presidential palace and washed their hands in a symbolic move to try to show their disgust with this, and where he may be taking this to change this in midstream is pretty dramatic. I don't know if they're trying to slow things down because of the Olympics, or there's something more nefarious going on here, but it certainly bears watching. And the last man standing may be the one that runs the ethics and compliance program for the Brazilian government.
Right. So a couple things from the government that I'm sure you and I can bat around. One was that the DOJ announced a permanent chief of the FCPA unit. It's a gentleman named Daniel Kahn, who was in there before. One of his big things was prosecuting the Eskenazi matter, and he also was involved with Alstom. So I'm sure you can comment on that. And then the second thing I'd like to talk about is the 11th Circuit has limited the SEC's ability to seek disgorgement, and it's something that I'm going to need a lawyer to talk to me about, because there's many different scenarios there when the disgorgement could be tax deductible or not tax deductible. So I'm hope that you can shed some light on that for me, Tom.
Well, sure. Let's start with the disgorgement issue first, because the ruling there was actually pretty narrow. And the question before the court was whether or not the SEC could go back more than 5 years. And the 5 years is significant because that's a statute of limitations for FCPA matters. So if or the applicable law in front of the court. So the Court of Appeals simply said that the statute of limitations controls, and I don't really think there's any debate on that. Whether corporations voluntarily will waive that's a separate issue and a separate discussion. But as a matter of law, the statute of limitations is 5 years, and unless you grant a tolling agreement, that's as far as you can go back. But let me piggyback onto that, because there was an equally interesting ruling from the Internal Revenue Service this week. And I'm going to have to go to the glasses here, because the IRS said that FCPA disgorgement is non-deductible, meaning you can't disgorge your profits back and take a deduction. Now, for the accountants out there, this may seem counterintuitive, because if you didn't make profits, you certainly shouldn't have to disclose, or declare that you've received profits on your tax returns. And since when you disgorge profits, it's going to be years after, you book those profits and probably pay taxes on them, it would seem at least one logical argument might be that you could take a deduction for that if you've already paid taxes on it. But the IRS ruled that disgorgement was essentially a penalty, and penalties cannot be are not tax deductible. And the IRS said, I'm just going to quote here, that's why I went to the glasses. Here, there is simply nothing indicating that the purpose of the disgorgement payment was to compensate the U.S. government or some non-government entity for its specific losses caused by the taxpayer's violation of the FCPA. Consequently, we think disgorgement payment is not deductible pursuant to Section 162F because the payment was primarily punitive. And I'm probably going to have to talk to some lawyers far smarter than I about what punitive means and why profit disgorgement is essentially punitive. But the SEC clearly has that available to it as a remedy. It's incorporated now into the Securities and Exchange Act of 1934 as amended. It's a very powerful tool used or wielded by the SEC in FCPA cases because they have the right to seek that full remedy. That's not been tested in court. The IRS opinion I cited is simply that, an opinion. So I don't know how that's going to impact the SEC's negotiations with companies if they can't deduct it, but it's going to be interesting to see it going forward. And always interesting when we have a court ruling and an IRS ruling on basically the same subject converge in the same week. Makes for kind of interesting conversation going forward.
So quick follow-on question. So you've got that 5-year statute of limitations. Do you think that could possibly have any effect to speed up investigations by the SEC to try to get in under the line so they could disgorge those profits?
Probably not.
Okay.
Probably not, because I think so many investigations are through self-disclosure. And if there's a self-disclosure, most probably the company will grant a tolling agreement to toll the statute of limitations. Perhaps if the SEC and or DOJ was doing an independent investigation, which the company did not know about, but once you get a subpoena, you're under investigation. So.
Great. And any thoughts on Daniel Kahn taking over at the FCPA unit?
Yep. I think good call. He's been there a while, very well respected. As you mentioned, the Eskenazi case. He now runs a 20-person unit, so they've doubled their size. So I think that's going to be a very large unit for him to run. And if you consider the impact of the Yates memo up to the pilot program, clearly the department is encouraging companies to self-report. And one of the things we heard at Compliance Week was companies making presentations to the Department of Justice with something called Yates binders. And these are simply notebooks of information about individuals, companies identified as potentially liable. So corporations are responding to these incentives as articulated in the pilot program. We have now, we went from 10 in the FCPA unit to 20. We have, I think, 2 more FBI units. So it's going to be a lot of more resources for Mr. Kahn to wield going forward. We will be interested to see his administration. We should probably give a kudos to Patrick Stokes, the former head of the unit. I thought he did a very good job of running it. Daniel also, Mr. Kahn, I should say, not my friend Daniel, my friend Dilma, Hillary, and Barack. Pat Stokes ran the unit, and Daniel Kahn, I think, follows an interesting and good tradition of bringing in some younger talent and younger blood, yet seasoned and very, very good.
Great. So that's the news stuff I have. Do you have any information on your peripatetic travels across this great country, where you've been, what you've got coming up?
Well, last week I was, or last week, of course, I was at Compliance Week 2016. This week I was at an internal controls workshop hosted by Workiva in New York City. All I have to say is do not try to fly after 4 p.m. anywhere in the U.S. now. It is miserable. So very bad weather systems. So except, of course, when it never rains in Southern California.
How was the
You guys were not in a drought. That was great news.
How was the TSA line?
You know, there was no line. I was stunned. I went to LaGuardia to try to catch an earlier flight, and literally I go through pre-check. There was no one in line. And on the non-pre-check line, there were 3 people. Now, once I got in the terminal, it was manic. But I was stunned. The pre-check line in Houston when I left was 25 minutes. They had armed guards at the head of the pre-check line. I'd never seen that before.
Wow. So I didn't do any traveling. I got back this week, but Tom and I got to see each other in DC on the upcoming conference circuit. ACFE is having their annual convention in Las Vegas. It starts a week from Sunday the 12th and runs until the 17th. It's always an interesting group of folks that get together, and Richard Dreyfuss will be presenting one of the sessions, speaking about his experience playing Bernard Madoff, not Bernie. But I pose an interesting question out to any of our listeners. I've never been to an ACFE before. I'm thinking about attending. So if anybody can weigh in positively or negatively, I'd love to hear feedback on that. And then I just have a corporate name change to let you know about that. Merrill Corp has officially divested their translations unit, of which I am one of the members and head of the U.S. sales team. And now we have gone back to, as Tom hinted at before, our original founders, the Brinks. So now Merrill Brink International is officially a division of United Language Group. We are focused 100% on the translation marketplace. And, we look forward to continuing to serve our clients and make more advances for them in terms of how we can help them with their ethics and compliance needs, whether it's translating codes of conduct or helping in any type of investigation situation.
Well, Jay, upcoming, I have a couple of exciting things. I am putting on some compliance roundtables for the Red Flag Group, and June 15th in Atlanta, June 16th, and then June 22nd in Minneapolis, June 23rd in Dallas, and June 24th here in Houston. So what I'm going to do is lead a very focused discussion about third-party due diligence in light of Unaoil and the Panama Papers. I think it's going to be more challenging now, particularly after Unaoil. We saw that the due diligence may not have been as useful because of the company's attitude towards lying to the people who are supplying or doing the due diligence. So it doesn't mean you can't move forward, but it's going to put pressure on the other steps. So I'm going to talk about the 5 steps in the life cycle management of third-party relationships, of course, of which due diligence is one and an important step. Nevertheless, there are other steps that you may be able to utilize. So if you're in Atlanta, Minneapolis, Dallas, or Houston, go to the Red Flag, www.theredflaggroup.com and check it out. And I hope if you're in one of those towns, you might join me.
Tom, are they early morning breakfast sessions, or what's the timing on them?
So Minneapolis is a breakfast. Atlanta is a lunch. Dallas is a lunch. And Houston is a lunch.
Okay.
So to kind of facilitate me traveling through all of that.
Great. And then we are actually going to finish a little bit early now. So is there anything random? We were very efficient hitting the news today. Anything else that's getting you to have a Howard Beale moment that you're ready to lose it on?
Yep. There was a note or news item this week that if you remember Valeant Pharmaceutical, who's been in the news, over the past year or so. Went from $90 billion valuation to $10 billion. Fired its CEO, Michael Pearson, or at least he left, and he received a termination package of $10 million and $850,000 a year in consulting for a couple of years. Now, this is after the company said that the accounting scandals that had erupted under his tenure were due to the tone at the top. So talk about rewarding very bad behavior, continued to do so. We also had, we didn't mention that we obviously should have, though, was the settlement in the Las Vegas Sands Corporation case. And there, the former head of the company's East Asia operations around Macau, who had been terminated by the corporation for allegedly failing to follow the terms and conditions of his employment agreement. And
you mean because he was a potential FCPA whistleblower? Was that what you're referring to?
And or a FCPA whistleblower. So
yes.
Unclear. But he settled his wrongful termination case for a whopping figure of somewhere between 70 and 100 million. I wrote about it, or I blogged about it, and in the Journal they quoted a couple of employment lawyers who were just flabbergasted at the amount of the settlement. They say typically it's a few million at most on these kinds of cases, but here we had just a huge payout. Nevertheless, it ends this chapter with the Sands involving a former East Asia head, Mr. Steve Jacobs, and they don't have to go to trial and air any dirty linen in a public forum. So pretty significant. Sands has just concluded an FCPA investigation. They paid a $9 million fine to the SEC, but reportedly had over $100 million in investigative costs. So once again, showing the true cost of an FCPA action. The fine and penalty really pales the total cost. So very interesting information out of Las Vegas around that issue.
If you go back to the timeline, Tom, was the wrongful termination suit filed first before the FCPA subpoena? Do you recall?
I believe the suit was filed before the FCPA subpoena. I believe that that the information contained in the original filing in state court in Nevada, I'm not sure if they call it a complaint or petition, contained allegations that caught the government's attention.
Great. I mean, not great, but I think that was how I recalled it too, that once that became admitted in court, and that I believe Mr. Jacobs said that he was no longer able to fulfill his duties due to some of the alleged practices of Las Vegas Sands and Macau, and how they were, trying to lure in high rollers and deal with state authorities. So I think that's where it all started.
Okay, looks like we're at the end. Jay, thanks a lot, and looking forward to continuing the conversation next week.
Great. Thanks, Tom. Take care, and thanks everyone for tuning in.